Hello and welcome to Lecture 6 or Unit 6 of the series of lectures for the Supply Chain Risk Management course. In this lesson, we want to look at risk mitigation and management. All through lectures 1 to 5, we have attempted to look at risk in today's business environment. We have attempted to look at the supply chain itself and what it is. Then we try to understand what constitutes risk in the supply chain in lecture 3. In lecture 4, we sought to look at the different aspects or stages of the supply chain. In lecture 5, we analyzed what constituted supply chain risk. So I can say that at this point, we have practically identified what risk is, what brings about the risk, what form the risks in the supply chain take. How can we analyze this risk both qualitatively and quantitatively? Now, we want to look at mitigation and management. If you know the risk that you face, if you appreciate the consequence of the risk that you face, you appreciate the likelihood of the risk occurring, then the question is, what do you do? So, we will look at development of risk management, supply chain risk management itself and its aim, the steps you can take to manage the risk, the principles of supply chain risk management, and managing risks through contracts. So, we will start off by challenging ourselves to imagine an organization with no risk management. What does this organization look like? You can think of it as an organization where managers are happy to sit back and wait to see what risk events will occur, so that after these risk events occur, they analyze the problem, design a response, and implement it. You can call this the pure reactive approach to risk management. So, I have no plan in place. I sit back, I wait. When the risk event occurs, then I come in with some margin of seriousness or hypocrisy. And then I come and analyze the risk. Then I prefer solutions, and then I implement the solutions. And you realize that typical of the African politician, the person sits back and allows a problem to occur. Then they analyze the problem and prefer solutions. And then they say the citizens should clap for them for creating the problem and solving it. Isn't Africa interesting? It is. We don't want to do reactive approach. We want to be the proactive approach. But let's take a minute to look at the characteristics of a reactive approach. And you find that under this approach, we did not recognize that there is a need to do anything until it is too late. So every time we don't do anything until it is too late. I'll give you several examples. When you take our student body, many people are willing and happy to wait when assignments are given and deadlines are proposed. They will wait and wait and wait until the last minute. And when they attempt to do it and they run into problems, then they quickly call you, wanting to suggest that it is the problem that prevented them from doing the assignment. What is this? We have managers of our utilities, electricity, water, waiting and not realizing that communities need lights. They allow these communities to do their own connections. Some people do illegal connections, and then they now come that they are fighting illegal connections. Okay, electricity runs up, so they can check illegal water. If I bury my pipe and I take it from far away and I enjoy the water, how can electricity, Ghana Water know about it? So you just see that we are a nation of reactive thinkers. We only respond to events that have actually happened rather than look for ways of preventing them or mitigating their effects. Look at the flooding in Accra and most of our cities. Are we saying we don't know the solutions? We do. One of the biggest problems is that people are building in waterways. What are the assemblies doing? What are the assemblymen doing that will allow people to first of all build in the waterway before now we want to come and destroy the buildings? We have school lands. People are encroaching on school lands. We wait for them to finish encroaching, then we ask the school to go to court. Then the court too will gladly give an order. Yes, pull all of them down. Then we also go with bulldozer. People who have suffered and sweated to put up something, a place that they can stay, we go and bulldoze all of them down. Am I saying we should leave them to be there? No. But we should prevent them from building in the first place. That is the proactive approach. Normally, you see people pretending to work quickly to get things sorted out. And so we rush into the wrong response. You remember the days of NDC when the dollar was misbehaving? Because there was no plan in place, NDC was running everywhere looking for solutions. Eventually, they introduced a transaction tax at the bank. And you know the consequence of that. Eventually, they paved the way for Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia to chastise them for introducing nuisance taxes. So when this government came, they had to remove it. But I realized that they also found different ways of introducing the same nuisance taxes in different forms. We are all reactive managers. We just imagine that some response is needed. But we don't make the necessary changes to make sure that the risk doesn't occur. So, one characteristic of the reactive approach is that the people involved may imagine some response is needed, but they don't make the necessary changes. As soon as rainy season comes and we begin to see the flooding, you see people talking big, behaving as if they have bombs. We will do this. We will do this. Koto Nepala. Nothing. As soon as the rain subsides, we go to sleep. Nadumo will walk around with pen and paper trying to find out which aspect of people's properties are destroyed. After that, they go to their office and they also go to sleep. That is what we are doing to ourselves. Fortunately, we keep talking about it. Many of you watching this video are going to be future ministers, future presidents, future leaders of organizations. Please, 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 let us change this reactive approach to doing things. Let us become proactive. Let us be able to make sure that at least, we are able to think ahead. Our cities have plans. Let us be wicked to each other. We cannot allow the selfish interests of a few individuals to override the collective interest of everybody. Somebody wants to build in a waterway, let the authorities break it. Otherwise, when somebody is affected by flood, I can assure you, according to the Islamic jurisprudence, you, the leader, will be called to account on the day of judgment. God is going to ask you, why did you take the mantle of leadership when you know that you cannot do things to solve the problem of the people? Break them. Let's be proactive. Let Electricity Corporation come out with a master plan for how they intend to wire the whole of Ghana. Let us get Ghana Water to come out with a comprehensive plan for how they intend to extend water to every nook and cranny of Ghana. Then we begin to do it according to projects and according to the money we have. But at least the master plan is there, so that every government that comes follows this master plan and do as much as they can. Don't we have brains? I believe we do. We cannot continue to be reactive thinkers. Any country that has adopted the reactive approach has always suffered. And it is no wonder that many countries in Africa are suffering, because many of us are reactive thinkers. Let's look at a few definitions. So, when we say risk management, what are we really looking at? Because don't forget, in this unit, we are looking at risk mitigation and management. So when we say the management, what are we talking about? It is the systematic identification and analysis of risk and responding to same throughout the organization. So we don't think of a part of the organization and leave a part of it. When we think risk, we must think of every part of the organization, and we must do it in a systematic way. So we just don't identify the risk. We analyze the risk. What analysis are you doing? You are looking at its likelihood and its consequence. And then you bring out a response. What will happen? After the risk, there are some you cannot do anything about, like a fire outbreak in a dormitory or in a hostel. You can't do anything about it. Some people are just careless. So what can we put in place to make sure that those things don't occur, and if they occur, they don't cause any serious damage? Supply chain risk management is the process of systematically identifying, analyzing, and dealing with risk towards the supply chain. So when you introduce supply chain to risk management, you have supply chain risk management. Sometimes you will ask, why are we taking this long and to be defining this in Unit 6? No, we have defined it already. Here we are bringing it in context, because once you have to mitigate, then you have to refresh your mind on what it is. If you don't refresh your mind on what it is, then what are you going to manage and what are you mitigating? So it is the topic that is causing us to go back to these definitions again. Now, if you have to develop risk management, then you have to appreciate that every organization and the way they will go about managing their risk. In insurance companies, they use the assessment of risk as a venture, or we say that they use their own method to assess the risk of a venture and calculate an appropriate fee. So they calculate the expected value of the risk, and then they are able to charge you premium based on it. Now we say that is called the insurance-based view of risk, and it uses a standard procedure to analyze historical records to find, one, the probability of the event, estimate the potential damage, calculate the expected value, and use it to charge a reasonable premium. That is why when you go to buy insurance, it's today that insurance companies have become so many that today many of them don't have the time to go into your history. Otherwise, they have to find out how many times have you had an accident since you bought your car. If you have bought your car for 3 years, why are you moving from your previous insurance company to ours? Elsewhere, all these are available by the click of a button. So you go to DVLA, you click on a particular applicant, and you have all these details. Once the car is registered, every accident it gets is entered into the system, and every issue that happens with it is also registered. And so the insurance companies are able to determine these things with real life information. Here they have to calculate and conjecture. So many times they have a standard approach. When you come the first time, you are going to do third party. The standard fee is 280 or 200 or whatever the fee is. And then we cover you for 1 year. Then we now begin to monitor you. Any accident you get, we record it and so on. But when you leave our company and you are going somewhere else, you get the start because they too don't have the data. I don't know if there's any a central point where all this data is kept. In fact, I don't know it. If there is, I don't know about it. So that is the insurance-based view. But we say that there are weaknesses to this kind of approach because, first of all, it concentrates on the types of events that occur fairly often and can be predicted. But it is useless when it comes to events that are rare and essentially unknown in advance. So the insurance approach, where I look at historical records, I look at the consequence, the likelihood of occurrence, the consequence, I calculate the expected value, and then I charge a premium. That is for events that occur fairly often. What of events that don't occur fairly often? What will you do about it? So we say that this one is based on compensation for damage. It does not look for ways of avoiding the damage. But now insurance companies are joining the road safety authority to educate the public. Some of them are sponsoring programs on FM stations to educate the public. The question is it enough? I don't know what else they could have done. But the insurance-based view does not go to the bottom of prevention. It is always looking for paying for damage. Inevitably, it encourages risk-averse management staff. So normally, this hampers growth and investment because we want you to avoid risk because the risk will bring you consequences. We are not helping you and encouraging you to look at ways and means of improving your system so that the risk is reduced. So, why should we take more interest in risk management? And you will find that it is because risk management gives benefits. What are the benefits? It allows for smoother and more reliable operations. Once you take risk serious, think of it ahead of time, put in measures that will prevent their occurrence. Trust me, your operation is smooth. Downtime is reduced. So there are fewer disruptions. All of that will come in the form of lower costs. If your cost comes down, don't forget value goes up because your profitability will keep increasing. And the value of an organization can mostly be judged by the level of its profitability. And they can also use it to gain competitive advantage because now your operations are becoming more reliable and you are perhaps doing better than your competitors. Also, that recognition is there that risk management is growing into a more centralized issue that can no longer be ignored. Because now, risk is everywhere. As we have gone through the various lectures, you have seen. If you take a typical supply chain, risk is everywhere, except that you try to look for ways and means of what? Minimizing them. So paying attention to risk management allows you to bring this as a mainstream function rather than a peripheral one. So you don't ignore it. Then you are introducing, some other organizations are introducing risk management and insisting that their trade partners also use appropriate procedures. So, recognizing risk in your organization is not enough. You have to also ensure that those that you work with also recognize the need for risk management so that at the end of the day, the entire operation of the supply chain is enhanced. Then, now we are also getting to the point where regulations and legislation are making risk management compulsory. And it is increasing the number of areas that risk management must be introduced. Because now you have to have a fire plan before fire service will even give you clearance for your building. You must have fire extinguishers. I wish we could do it to everything. So this kind of legislation and regulation is reducing risk. So when there's a fire extinguisher nearby. The whole aim is that the fire does not spread to other places, because we can put it out in record time. So now let's zero in on supply chain risk management. We have defined it as the systematic identification, analyzing, and then responding to risk within the supply chain. So what is its responsibility? It is responsible for all aspects of risk to the supply chain, and normally it starts with senior officers. Even though we are saying senior logistics officers, the impression is that people managing the supply chain should be logistics officers and they should be part of senior management. So now we are recognizing that there needs to be an overall strategy, identify its requirements from the logistics point of view, and designing a long-term plan for dealing with risk in the supply chain. So we need to know who is responsible for strategic management of risk within the supply chain. Is it the work of a risk committee? If so, what is its membership? And what are the details of the management structure? Who reports to who? Who deals with which aspect of risk? We need to know that. Then, what are the resources available, the systems, the tools, the facilities we have made available for managing supply chain risk? These things don't come by themselves. You will have to consciously and intentionally put them in place. Do I have an answer to what should be put in place? No. These are organization specific. Every organization must think through and see what they have to put in place that is appropriate to their operations. So people in cement will come out with what works for them. People with oil and gas will come out with what works for them. People in food and beverages will come out with what works for them, and so on and so on and so on. So when you think of the procedures and methods for assembling risk, what we need to do is that you develop your own procedure, your method, and then you can look at the tools around and choose which one works for you. And the aim is for you to assemble a list of risks, their causes, their likelihood, and their consequence. You remember the risk register I put first, type of risk, the trigger, the likelihood, the consequence. Yes, that is exactly the list being talked about here. So now you don't look at your procedures, methods, and choose for analyzing it. Are you going to use qualitative, quantitative? If you are using qualitative, what is the plan? If you are using quantitative, what is the plan? The best is to use both to apply it to any risk that is possible to occur. Because some risks are by their nature qualitative. For example, I want to marry. I want to know the chances of not marrying the wrong person. I don't know how you can quantitatively do this. But look at the situation where I am producing a new product. I want to know whether it will do well on the market. I can quantitatively determine this. So, whatever procedures, methods, and tools you put in place, sometimes doing the two is best, except that you have to acknowledge that there are some that are genuinely qualitative. They lend themselves to qualitative analysis, while other risks lend themselves to quantitative analysis. But on the whole, many of them allow for a mixed approach. So then, you now look at your procedures, methods, and tools for designing alternative responses and selecting the most appropriate response at all times. Then, you have to think about policies for allocating and sharing risk among stakeholders. It is usually not the best for one organization or one individual to carry all the burden. So look at me. Let's go back to me wanting to marry, and I'm trying to be sure that I'm not marrying the wrong person. Sometimes you commission friends, family to do a background check. Though you are the one who will be living with this person, but don't forget whatever happens to your marriage can affect your loved ones, your family. So it is important that you allocate and share the risk in such a way that everybody plays a certain role in ensuring that this marriage is about the best. Then, how are you going to monitor risk? Maintain the risk management process, update procedures, communicate results, measure performance, and achieve continuous improvement. You must put that in place. It doesn't exist. Every organization must think and put this in place. How will you monitor risk? Are you going to do so qualitatively or quantitatively? How are you going to maintain the plan you have put in place to manage your risk? In this university, in terms of exams, we have boards sitting on it. After that, students can write for review. So, how do we ensure that this is maintained? How do we update it? How do we ensure it is working? How do we measure performance? All these things are there. How do we continuously improve? All this is more like a top-down approach where senior managers think about it and then introduce their thoughts to operational managers. We can also do a bottom-up approach where everybody in the organization, especially at the lower level, contribute to what kind of risk they face and how they think those risks can be managed. So, what is the aim of supply chain risk management? The overall aim of supply chain risk is to ensure that the supply chain continues to work as planned, smoothly and uninterrupted. So, we don't want anything to interrupt the flow of materials from suppliers to manufacturing firms or focal firms all the way to consumers or customers. We don't want anything to disrupt this flow. And that is the aim of supply chain risk management, to ensure that the supply chain continues to work as planned. So, to support this underlying aim of uninterrupted flows, supply chain has a series of more immediate goals that it has to achieve. First, you must design a supply chain strategy that fits with the higher organizational risk strategies and set the context for supply chain risk management. Are you going the efficient way or the responsive way? If you are going the responsive way, it means you want to meet your customers at least about 95% of the time according to their needs. What risk does that introduce for your supply chain? It means it gives it very little room for disruptions. If you must take disruptions on board, then you must have safety stock. So you must think of all this in your design. Then you meet any legal, regulatory, or contractual requirements. So if we must achieve the aim of ensuring that we are able to meet every student's need in terms of even accommodation, Think about the legal framework. If we want to do PPP, public-private partnership, where people come to build because we don't have the money, then we must think of how many years are we giving them. The land, is it ours? What are the issues? What will society think? Would they think somebody is taking advantage of the situation? Then we have to embed risk management within the function of supply chain. To embed it means to introduce risk management at each stage. Don't wait until you come to the end when the particular risk event has occurred. Before now you are introducing remedial measures. No. At every stage of the supply chain, you must think of what possible risk is likely to occur and how are you going to control it and make sure its effect is minimal or eliminated. It must be at each stage. So then you ensure that you make resources available. You build systems that are appropriate. And then you have facilities that support supply chain risk management. You cannot assume that you want to manage risk and then you don't even have information system structure where supply chain officers can communicate, can track, can do some of these things online without having to travel. Even if they have to travel, no vehicles. You are not ready to provide TNT and night allowance. No, you can't do that. Then you have to identify the best practices for supply chain risk management. So what are the relevant procedures? What technology do we need? What planning do we need to do? What kind of information sharing must occur? Those are best practices, and you must come out with what works for you. So using these practices to identify, analyze, and plan response to risks. And then you implement the planned responses. You are not just developing the responses by word of mouth. And then when you have planned and they occur and you implement, you must control. So you have to compare what you have implemented with what was planned. So I decide that when there is a fire, we all run to the collection point and then we disperse from there, or we wait there until the situation is brought under control. So that is our plan. Now the fire occurred. What did we do? Did everybody run home, or we all ran towards the collection point? So subsequently, what can we do to make sure if people run home, they don't run home the next time? Then we monitor performance and continually develop and improve the methods. Then we have to cooperate with other partners of the organization and members of the supply chain so that we have a comprehensive and coherent attitude towards risk. In Ghana, we lack that. At every point in time, opposition, it is this coronavirus that I've even seen that everybody is talking about how to deal with it. In the past, we have had opposition rather taking advantage of the situation and wanting the government in power to look bad. You have to notice that these aims say nothing about reducing risk. You are just interested in putting a plan in place so that when the risk event occurs, you can deal with it. That's the management bit. So, what are the steps in risk management then? We'll come to the mitigation. First, identify the risks to the supply chain. Analyze them. Look for likelihood consequences. Design appropriate responses to the risk. Very easy. So, what are the principles? 1. You want to create a balance between vulnerability and efficiency. Because don't forget that when efficiency is like eliminating all waste so that your input can give you a very big output. But that also makes you vulnerable. So as you are pushing efficiency, you have to find a nice balance between, because some people even think that keeping safety stock is waste. But if you don't keep safety stock too, you become more efficient. However, you become very vulnerable. A slight fluctuation in demand can create a lot of problems for you. So Now you look for more careful way of balancing between vulnerability and efficiency. So you introduce slack sometimes. What is the slack? Some stock, some spare capacity, some backup systems, longer lead times where it is necessary. And you should know that this balance can be achieved when you apply a combination of these. Some small stocks, some small spare capacity, some backup system, some longer lead time, so that all together you are able to manage the risk between efficiency and vulnerability. Now you have to diversify to reduce your risk. So if you are sourcing from one person or one company, change that. Source from a number. Not too many enough to create problems for you, but at least enough for you not to rely solely on one single source. Then you can use multiple locations to secure more than a single centralized one. Because don't forget that when you have a single centralized one and something happens to it, the risk is mega. I don't know how many of you remember the burning down of the central medical stores, the national one at Tema. You can imagine what we lost. So now, perhaps we want to move it to the regional medical stores where the national doesn't keep much. The regions keep as much as they can. In fact, we even have to decentralize further, where districts are now beginning to keep what they can. Then you can create parallel transport links that are less risky than single paths. Every time Accra Kumasi, you use the Nsawam road. What if the road blocks? So what are the alternatives available to you? You need to identify all that and know that they exist. Then you adopt agility to reduce risk. And one way of doing that is to use modular processes. A process that starts and ends. Another starts and ends. If you look at the modular program that we do for MSc supply chain, you do 2 courses at a time, you write their exams, and you close your mind. So that is a process. And the product is when you have finished writing the exam. When you graduate out of this process, then you are a product of the modular process. And we are doing that to increase our agility and reduce our risk. We want to admit more students. Applications are increasing, but then we have space constraints. Should we bring everybody to campus? No, we can't do that. So it is part of introducing flexibility to allow you to attend class anywhere the course is taught and write exams anywhere in the country during examination periods. Then the supply chain risk management must be proactive. That reactive approach that we discussed at the beginning is bogus. Any organization or nation or individual that adopts this approach is headed for doom. If you don't even head to doom, your progress will be stagnated and it will take you a long time. That's why people are saying Ghana is developing all right, yes, but the pace of development is too slow for the kind of resources we command. So waiting for risk events and then relying on good crisis management does not work and will not work. You make risk management an essential element and then you embed it in the corporate culture. Let everybody see risk management as a part of their everyday activity. In fact, you can make it a legal requirement where a staff of the organization sign an undertaking to be risk conscious. Then you can also formulate strategies and alliances to make sure that harmful events never actually materialize. Or even when they materialize, their consequence is reduced to nothing. That's their impact. And then you can also implement total quality management as insurance against effects. or poor quality. Because don't forget that total quality management has defect detection throughout the process as one of its hallmarks, where we don't wait for the event to happen at the end. At each stage, we look out for defects, and then we correct and remove those defective things. So, managing risk through contracts has its own advantages and disadvantages. So, normally, what contracts do is to set the roles, the rights, and obligations of parties involved in the transaction. So when I sign a contract with you to manage the risk of my organization, what I'm saying is that we have both agreed on our roles. You have your right, I have my right. You have your obligations, I have mine. So that at the end of the day, it is a win-win for all of us. So the question is, what then is a contract? It is a statement exactly that describes exactly what two or more parties have agreed to do or exchange. So we specify what we have agreed to do in terms of specifications, prices, delivery payment date, and so on. Then we set out in this document conditions and contingencies that may alter the arrangement. So circumstances under which it will not be reasonable to enforce certain terms. You just heard this morning or yesterday, IMF and World Bank telling countries that have repayment schedules with other countries, developing countries, to put it on hold because economies are struggling. So if I owe you around this time, that there's lockdown everywhere, and you want me to pay you back, that can be a problem. So the rights of each party, if the other fails to do what they are supposed to do, that is remedies for breach of contract, is also contained in this document. And then responsibility or liability can be apportioned. So who pays for damages or loss of goods? How will we resolve disputes? It must be contained in the contract. What are the contract terms? Contract terms are statements by the parties to the contract as to what they understand their rights and obligations to be under the contract. So contract terms define the content of the offer or counter offer, which become binding once accepted through endorsement by signing. So when we have to litigate, when we have to go to court, the contracted terms become a key basis for judgment. So let's look at the types of contract terms. And there are a number of important distinctions in regard to these terms, and there are a number of them. So we have the express terms. These are explicitly inserted in the contract by either or both parties. So those are express terms, those ones that are not arguable on. It's clear. You are to do A, and I am to do B. It is not contentious. The definition of A is known. The definition of B is known. Those are express terms. Then we have implied terms. They are automatically assumed to be part of the contract by virtue of a certain relevant statute, custom or business, and other factors. Is that okay? So, for example, let's say that I'm using this unpopular example. I and somebody agreed to marry. It means each of us has agreed in principle to forgo some of your personal rights. So you cannot sue your wife for coming into your room without permission. Or the wife cannot sue the husband for coming into her room without permission. And that is why this concept of marital rape is not gaining grounds around the world. Because it is my right as part of the contract we have signed. It is an implied right that whenever I need my wife, she should be there, and vice versa. But in contracts, these implied terms sometimes create a lot of problems and take us to court for interpretation. Look at, though this is not a contract, I'm just citing as an example, EC wanting to put together a new register. And then the first clause that describes the functions of the EC in the Constitution says the EC shall put together the register of voters and review it from time to time. I have listened to several lawyers who have interpreted this to mean EC can decide to do a new register anytime he wants. And I have also listened to others who have said this means that EC can only compile one register and then review it from time to time. That means that register that was compiled in 1992 is the register that we are still using. And that is why this EC may run into legal tussle. Because in all the other new registrations, you have to bring the old card as proof of your being a voter. So technically it means we are accepting the old one and we are reviewing it. So we are adding those who were not there and we are adding certain features. Now this current EC want to discard this and do a new one because the document they submitted to Parliament is saying that the old voters ID card cannot be used as a source document to identify you as a registered voter before, which means they are throwing away the register and doing a new one. Let's see what the Supreme Court will say, because this is an implied term and only they are clothed with the power to interpret. Then we have conditions. These are vital terms of the contract, the breach of which entitles the wronged party to cancel or repudiate the contract. So, after the conditions, any violation in any of them must come with consequences, and the party wronged can cancel or seek repudiation. That is why the head of DOFSU, I don't know if it's the national head or the regional head, advised men to also come and report their wives who deny them sex. Because the contract is that you are going to be there when I need you. And he has encouraged women to also report their husbands who deny them sex and then upkeep. So it is a two-way. These are conditions that govern marriages, or the conditions that we agree to, that you do A, you do B, you do C, I will do E, F, and G. Conditions that when trampled upon, the wrong party can seek repudiation. Then we have warranties. These ones are non-vital, the breach of which only entitles the wrong party to damages. So you didn't live up to the expectation. So I sue you for damages and you pay me something, or you are compelled to introduce a corrective action. So it is important to make this distinction in managing risk of non-performance breach of contract. So these terms, the express terms, the implied terms, the conditions, and the warranties are very necessary, and they are distinct when you have to manage non-performance or breach of a contract. So let's compare provisions to mitigate or remedy risk. Now the supplier delivers the wrong quantity. Contract provision. The quantity to be supplied, show the quantity delivered should be established, and who in the organization should deal with any such query. So delivering wrong quantity is a potential risk. What provision can you put in there to make sure that this risk is proactively dealt with? State the quantity, how the delivery will be done, who in the organization must deal with it. Look at another potential risk. The product is not made to the correct specification. The contract must provide product specification. So you realize that for most procurement of goods, you the supplier, you are given a sample. The idea is that we don't want you to come and say we didn't describe what you want you to do very well. So we have given you a sample. We want you to produce exactly this. A potential risk like the supplier is late with delivery. What can we do? How can potentially late deliveries be dealt with? Whether time is of essence in delivery or not, it must be stated in the contract. All these are potential risks and the kind of contract provision that will allow you to deal with them. And it continues. Now let's look at remedies for contract failure. Once the contracted terms are designed, their aim is to minimize risk by clarifying expectations and obligations. So anytime you will have a contract, the primary aim of that contract is to minimize risk by clarifying everything that we expect. And then it is acting as a distinct disincentive to non-performance. Because you know that when you underperform or you don't perform according to specification, there is a way that you will be dealt with. Because the wrong party will seek redress, either in court or in any arbitration process. In appropriate cases, the party who has suffered a breach of contract may have the following remedies in law: damages, financial compensation, specific performance, a remedy whereby the court orders the defendant to carry out his obligation under the contract. And sometimes, for this specific performance, damages alone may not remedy the situation. So the court will go ahead to mandate specific performance. So you have somebody who has impregnated somebody and refuses to take responsibility. When this matter is taken to court and the court looks at the agreements they have had, a specific performance is expected of the person, where the person is asked to come to the court and pay some money every month for the lady to come there and take. Then we have injunction. It is a remedy whereby a court orders a person to do or not do something in order to avoid the breach of contracts. And then the quantum merits. That is a remedy available when a contract has been partly performed. That means that the party which has suffered it receives a fair amount as compensation. So it is like a merit based on a certain quantum of what has not been done. So you are entitled to a benefit or a compensation that is fair. Otherwise, the person is also asked to perform the work. So let's say there is a contract and I did the contract up to a point. Now I couldn't continue. So it has become necessary for this contract to be abrogated. It will not be fair to say that I get nothing. At least you pay me for what I have done, the quantum of work I have performed. That's another way of looking at it. So these are all remedies under the law, and wrong parties that feel aggrieved or wrong can go for any of them. Thank you very much. As I said, if you have any concerns, please feel free to contact elearning@knsc.edu.gh or elearningknsc@gmail.com. Thank you very much.